The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. And you guys head over to afteractionproject.com/giveaway. We're giving away a gift certificate to Southwest Gunsmith Technologies where you can get some laser stifling done, Cerakote job, some other cool stuff. I think there were all of the isms.
I'm going to fill out a comment card when we're done here.
Oh, man, it was a huge mistake, too.
So,
you said everything from beginner to, the rock star kind of guy.
His draw was sporty. Like he definitely had the sub-second draw down.
This is the After Action Project, and we're bringing you the student's perspective on firearms training. This is the podcast that takes you inside the eyes of the student and the mind of the instructor, from practical to tactical, medical to legal, and everything in between. If there's a course for it, this is your fly-on-the-wall After Action destination. This is the After Action Project.
Tonight, we're joined by Tim Herron of TimHerronShooting.com and his student, Eric. Both of these guys are Grandmaster shooters for the USPSA. Head over to TimHerronShooting.com, find out more information there. We're going to be talking about the 2-day practical performance course. Before we get into that, Tim, talk to us. So I heard you used to do autocross racing. What is that about, and how did you start pulling a trigger on some guns?
Well, it started... Gosh, back in about 97 or 98, I was right out of college. And one of my college buddies had gotten me into autocross. And for those that don't know, my main career for about the last 22 years has been as an automotive technician. So I do everything from suspension to air conditioning to engines to transmissions, everything. And I got started in autocross just kind of as a fun outlet to, something to do on the weekends, and found out that, I kind of got good at it, and autocrossed at the national level for, years. I got started in 97. I think my last year of autocross competition was 2009, 2010. And unfortunately, I just got burned out. So it went from autocross to doing a whole lot of nothing for about a year. And a friend of mine had taken me out to the range one time to watch them do their qualification actually for armed security. And it had to do with a handgun. I was like, God, that seems kind of fun. I wouldn't mind doing some handgun shooting. And shot their handgun. We spent another hour or so at the range, and I was so hooked, all of a sudden, just instantly, I was like, okay, I got to go buy a gun. So February 10th of 2010, I went and bought my first handgun, and wanted to learn how to be as good as I could with it. I'm not one of those guys that can just go, dip a toe in the water when it comes to a sport or a hobby or an interest. I'm kind of the guy that just immediately jumps on the high dive board and just jumps in head first. And that kind of is what happened with handgunning. I'd go to the indoor range every single day from, about 9 a.m. when they opened till about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, shooting box ammo, stock ammo, from the range, 300, 400, 500 rounds a weekend. Just learning how to get better. Accuracy was king. I bought my first holster, started taking lessons from, the range instructor they had on staff at the indoor range, and the range safety officer. And I learned how to draw, safely from a holster. And I didn't even know USPSA or IPSC or any of that kind of stuff even existed yet. So about, 6 months into just shooting, I had asked the range safety officer there if he knew anything. It would be, I just had mentioned to him, I was like, it'd be really cool if there was a sport where you could draw from a holster and reload on the clock and then run through an obstacle course or something to shoot. And he just looked at me like I was a complete idiot. And he was like, oh yeah, you're talking about IPSC. And I was like, what? And he's like, IPSC, IPSC. And I was like, what the hell is that? And he's like, oh, it's International Practical Shooting Confederation. Because I think in the United States, they call it USPSA. He goes, we have a couple of guys here that come in on Saturdays or Sundays and, like sight in their guns or just do some indoor range practice. He goes, I'll hook you up with one of them. And he introduced me to a guy named John Sandlin. And John was kind of almost burning out himself. He'd shot for about the last 15 years or so as USPSA. And John kind of stayed in the sport for a couple more years and kind of took me under his wing and, took me to my first outdoor match and kind of taught me the ropes and range commands and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, from the very first match, actually our very first practice session, I was hooked.
It's all downhill from there.
Oh yeah, completely. It was like taking your first hit of heroin or something. You're like, yep, I'm done.
Heroin's cheaper.
Yeah, just like tapping the vein. I'm like, all right, I want more of this. So he kind of put me on a dry fire program, and I started dry firing. I didn't know what the hell that was. YouTube videos and different Facebook pages and stuff. And I remember the first time I watched a Travis Tomasi video. That's him like standing in his. I want to say it was almost like in his barracks.
Yes,
when he was the U.S. Army AMU, when he does the like the sub 1 second reload with the open gun, and it was like that was the most awe-inspiring thing I had ever seen in my entire life. And I was like, I want to be that guy. I don't know who that guy is, but I want to be that guy. And so Travis Tomasi was kind of like my pinnacle, like my godlike figure that I wanted to strive to be so much like. And to this day, Travis and I, are pretty good friends. Every time I see it, Travis had shot or at matches and things like that, that guy is awesome to me, So that was kind of the path I followed and started in USPSA, and I've been there ever since. And I love every aspect of practical shooting and handgunning, and that's kind of my thing.
So 2010, it's when you started shooting, and then when did you become a grandmaster shooter?
I struggled for a couple of years, kind of as like I made B class pretty quick. I was hungry to want to to get better at this, but it's like I kind of plateaued off at B class for a couple of years, and it wasn't until I took a Mike Seeklander class. I want to say it was in 2012 or 2013, and I took a Seeklander class, and that was my very first foray into like professional instruction, and taking lessons from somebody. And with Mike, everything was about like actually learning how to practice, and like what purposeful practice was. And once I finally like really pulled my head out of my rear and understood then like everything I've been doing for the last 3 years has been wrong. I mean, it got me so far, but I was stuck and I didn't know how to get past that. It wasn't probably about 6 months after I took that Seeklander class in 2000. It must have been 2012, because in 2013 I went from B and almost skipped directly over A and went to master. And I was a master for about 6 months by the end of the season of 2013. And about the beginning of 2014, I kind of made GM by accident. It was just kind of one of those, like all the puzzle pieces kind of fell together for me, and shot a local match and had a couple of classifier stages, and boom, I made GM. And then I was freaked out, just like, oh God, now what do I do? So I've been a GM since 2014.
Nice.
So, I have a question. You said in the pre-show that Tim wanted you to be his first, GM that he trained. What kind of pressure is that when somebody like, asks,
oh man,
I want to get my first GM.
Well, one of the great things about Tim is he kept in touch after the class. It wasn't like, thank you for your time, and then he moved on. Like, we kept in touch, and mainly because he probably just wanted to keep harassing me. But but through one of those conversations, I was expressing some frustrations I was having because that making GM at that last 5%, it can be rough. And I don't know, I don't remember what the exact words were, but he's like, man, I want you to be my first GM. And it just hit me hard. And I was like, I can't, it's like disappointing your dad. You know what I mean? I'm like, I can't disappoint dad. And so it gave me that, I had the drive, but it gave me that second gear drive. And which kind of pushed me to hit that extra, percentage that I needed. So
that's pretty awesome. I really like those kind of relationships where, and it's not necessarily the dad son thing, but just those those heartfelt relationships where you look at somebody and you're like, I can't let this person down. And I have a friend of mine. His name is Blake Mooney, and he very much is my protege as far as instructing, and he's following me through my path, and I'm teaching him everything. And it's really, I guess heartfelt to hear somebody like you say, it was that one person that said that one thing that pushed me to do, more, to be more kind of thing.
Yeah. And when I talk about what Tim did for me with people, it's hard not to get emotional when I talk about some of the game changing stuff that he did with me. Because I've been shooting for 5 years and I was in a rut for a really big time or for a long period. And Tim was a game changer for me.
Clearly.
So when did you start shooting? And then when did you start competitively shooting?
I've been shooting ever since I was a kid, but it was nothing more than just going out in the desert and seeing how fast you could shoot through a 30-round AR mag, or go out to the indoor range and, buy boxed ammo and just burn through it. Nothing to that extent, but I want to say about 5 years ago, I was at the Reserve Academy. I used to be a reserve deputy and met a guy that had done some IDPA shooting. And I had no idea this kind of stuff ever existed. Like Tim had said, it's just mind blowing that, it's not huge, but it's like, how is this thing a black hole in our community to not know about USPSA or IDPA? But so about 5 years, I started shooting IDPA and I quickly kind of got sucked into the USPSA world. I started off as a C-class shooter right away, and then I made my way to B, and I was stuck in B for almost 2 years. That's where I really wish I would have come across Tim. However, through some self-teachings and whatnot, I pushed my way to master after another year, but then I kind of got into another rut, and then I met Tim and started putting some of his philosophies and teachings into effect, and that's when I made GM this year.
Awesome. So I have a question for you again, Eric. What exactly is in your right hand?
You talking about this? So this is the trial run. I'm sure my buddies are going to make some kind of phallic jokes I'm sitting there watching the video and I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, oh God, what did I do? No, but I've been on some podcasts before and audio's been a big issue. And so I was like, I'm going to go drop $20 on a little Amazon mic. And so I'm just giving that a try. But yeah, I looked at the video and I'm like, my buddies are never going to live this or let me live this down. Yeah, let's help. There we go. It's a little better.
Well, the audio quality is really good for a $20 mic.
He's the tech guy, right?
So how many matches a month were you? Sorry, Judson, totally cut you off there, man.
I was just going to say really quick, I do want all of our listeners to know that the 20 or 30 minutes in our pre-show for this particular episode was the absolute funniest, best pre-show we have ever done.
Y'all missed out.
There was a little bit of racism.
I think there were all of the isms. All of the isms.
I'm going to fill out a comment card when we're done here.
Yeah, send it to voda.com. So we're talking about the 2-day practical. What class shooter were you before you took that 2-day practical performance course with Tim?
I was a master class shooter. I would probably say I was a low-level master.
Yeah, you give yourself better credit than that.
Are you saying I wasn't that good?
No, I said more credit than that. You were definitely solid M, high M. You just needed that little push. That was all.
Or that little kick you gave me.
Well, that too.
So what does somebody need to take that class? If do you have to be a competitive shooter? Do you have to be a certain class shooter before you can take that 2-day practical performance?
Not at all. Not at all. I do kind of request from students that they at least have some sort of practical shooting, and not really background, but some sort of experience. Like at least they're comfortable, as far as being safe, drawing a gun from a holster and being able to reload the gun or manipulate the gun in a way that is safe. That's pointed down range. They feel comfortable at least moving with a gun in their hand. But as far as anything else, Eric, actually, Eric's giving me more credit than I deserve. Eric was absolutely the most instrumental person in getting me beyond just a competitive shooter into like a full scale instructor. Eric was also the first guy responsible for like hosting me up in Boise, Idaho last year for my first official practical pistol class, practical performance class. So, I mean, we had shooters from all, kind of all makes and models, so to speak. I mean, we had everything from brand new shooters to less than a year of experience, like female shooters to, guys that were basically just barely old enough to be past junior shooters, to guys that have been shooting in the sport for about the last, 14, 15 years. So, I had everybody from the least experienced person to, guys like Eric. And I believe there was one other masterclass shooter or two other masterclass shooters in that class. And so, I mean, for me, it was kind of like, oh boy, here we go. We're going to see how good I can actually relate to people from all, from all backgrounds. And it worked out great. And Eric, talking about me giving him the kind of kick in the pants he needed. I mean, for me, that was him giving me the kick in the pants I needed to feel confident enough to teach, full time, or to think about teaching, completely full time, and giving me the confidence to know that I could handle just any situation. So, with any shooter.
I have a question for you that you really kind of segued into kind of what one of our next questions is. When you like put a class out there, what student are you looking for? I mean, you said everything from beginner to, the rock star kind of guy, mm-hmm. like Jeremy. Like Jeremy can go out to the range and he's just, a rock star. He's got all the right gear. He's got all the right attitude. And then you got the never ever new guy. What's your ideal student as far as like in the what's the word you used, Jeremy? It's not the repertoire, but the
what's the sort of like what's the minimum skill set level that somebody should have, or where does a course fall on a student's continuum of training?
I really don't have. I do not want to be one of those instructors that, limits myself or limits my clientele, or to a certain level. Like you have to attain a certain level before you're allowed to come to my class. I don't like that. I don't agree with it. I think anybody that is put themselves, or, definitely done some self-reflection to, within themselves to realize like, okay, I think I'm ready for some actual like professional instruction, like something proper. If they're willing to pay the money, to actually and spend the time and energy into coming to a class to learn, obviously, I mean, they've done more than 95% of the other people out there that, claim to be, gun guys or good shooters or, or students of the sport, so to speak. I mean, to me, shooting it's a lifestyle, it's not just it kind of goes beyond the hobbyist or, the sporting type of shooter. And I want to be able to, give myself completely to every level of shooter, so, I mean, I don't like putting kind of nameplates on things, like, well, you got to be B class or above in order to come to this class, and I believe Eric would be able to tell you the same thing. I mean, I think I can cater to everybody from the absolute brand new shooters that might have, they might have accuracy issues of being able to hit the target at 7 yards to, the upper echelon, top 16 national level, master level shooter, and every skill set in between. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into, I need this bare minimum in order to come to my class. That's not fair to the student.
I want to add something to that. So with me being a masterclass shooter at that time, I've got my fundamentals down, but having some lesser skilled shooters in the class helped me out, because as Tim was doing some one-on-one instructioning with those people, those were kind of reminders of things I needed to focus on that I may have forgotten about. And that's one of the things I tell people. We've got another Tim Herron class come up, and I tell them, you're going to get out of this class what you want. if Tim's instructing somebody else, don't just walk away and ignore him. Go listen, because there is value in everything that he's saying, even if you're not the one that's messing that up right now.
I like it. I like it a lot.
So a couple things I want to come back to, but before we get too far into the deal, Eric, what gear did you run for that class?
Oh man, it was a huge mistake too. I'm a big advocate for sticking with the division and sticking with the firearm. However, we've got 3 local matches that are must shoot matches. It's a 1911 match, it's a Glocks only match, and then so there was a Glocks only match coming up, and so I was shooting a G34 carry optics, and the grip angle on the Glock is significantly different than what I'm used to. And it almost took me back like at least a half a skill level in that class. My draws were slow. It was horrible, but I did win that Glocks only match, high overall, a couple weeks from that. So, but yeah, I was shooting a G34 with a carry optics rig.
What about the holster, the belt, were you running your competition setup, I'd imagine? Oh
yeah, definitely. I was running, just double alpha pouches with a Hoftac, which is a local Kydex company out of here. I definitely would recommend running what you're in that class for as far as your division and whatnot. So it wasn't a far change for me or a stretch because I shoot carry optics, but that gun with that grip angle was definitely different than what I was used to. I was embarrassed by some of the drills we were running. I remember Tim teasing me about how bad my draw was. I remember that.
His draw was sporty. Like he definitely had like the sub-second draw down. But the problem was it was like sub-second draw, the gun would be like, boom, it's presented. And then all of a sudden he was like, hunt for it. There it is.
I don't know if you guys ever watch like brand new open shooters or optic shooters. You do that little wrist shake, like where's that dot?
That sub-second draw was awful.
Get the gun out fast, but I
love it. So over the 2 days, how many rounds did you shoot, man?
Oh, wow. Well, I probably shot the least amount because of, I'm not going to try and boast, but I had the least to work on. But I want to say close to 500 rounds. I do say, Tim, you had mentioned that we wanted to shoot more rounds, but it was like his first class getting back into it. And so the round count was a little up in air what it was going to be, but it was roughly, I'd say, about 500 rounds.
Yeah. And then, Tim, what gear, if I was going to take that class next week, and what gear do I have to bring out with me?
Honestly, you need enough equipment or gear, like based on what your particular division that you shoot in, that would allow you to complete like a 28 to 32 round course of fire, USPSA competition level course of fire. Other than that, so, if you shot limited, let's say even with like a Glock 19, you need a holster for a Glock 19, the gun, and 3 magazines and possibly, 3 mag pouches, and you'd be golden. So it's nothing about the class is equipment intensive, and it's designed that way so that I can, again, to cater to all levels of shooters. So, the majority of my student body are, USPSA or IDPA shooters. So obviously, catering to what they already kind of know, like bring your gear, your normal holster and mag pouches and rig that you would typically come to a class with. And I think I've in the 4 or 5 classes that I taught just throughout last year alone, the latter half of last year alone, I was able to really kind of dial in everything as far as round count. So like I tell everybody to bring about 600 rounds to the class. And it's not that I've never been that type of person to judge a class based on round count. And I pity the student that does. I feel like you're setting yourself up for like a big mistake, to come to a class and be like, oh man, this class is going to be awesome because they said I'm going to shoot 1,000 rounds in 2 days, or I'm going to shoot 1,200 rounds in 2 days. And round count really that has so little to do with the level of instruction, the level of involvement in the class. I focus on quantity of rounds fired downrange, or quality of rounds downrange, not quantity. I want every round to be accounted for. I want you to learn something from every single time that you press the trigger, not just do this drill for the sake of doing a drill. And we're going to go through 50 rounds on this drill. And then we're going to do 100 rounds on that drill. Like, I just don't feel like a student is really learning anything just based on just repetition alone. I mean, you're coming to a class to learn how to self-diagnose. You're coming to a class because you've reached a plateau that you just don't feel like you by yourself can get past. And what I tell people all the time in a class is, like, this class isn't about making you a better shooter right now today. This class is about giving you the tools for your proverbial toolbox to be able to take into your own practice and learn to get better and be able to diagnose your own faults or failures or your own successes and be able to build upon those. So I would rather spend 500 to 600 quality rounds, together on a 2-day course versus telling you to bring 1,000 rounds and then you're just planting lead seeds into the ground just to make noise, because neither of us are getting anything out of that.
I personally feel that putting emphasis on round count is misleading because, of course, you're going to get better at something if you shot 1,000 rounds doing that one thing. But, I would much rather have my time spent getting all those tools and tips versus just doing, repetition and repetition. So I think in a way it can be misleading by putting too much emphasis on the rounds.
I feel like the more that the more instructors that I've talked to in the classes that I've looked into and taken, it's almost where I feel like the higher the round count, the less instruction will be provided. And that's just a perception that I have, and I'd imagine there's other, if you're taking a 2-day class and you shoot 1,200 rounds, I'd imagine there's some coaching, and it depends on the instructor. But a generalization that I've come to is, my perception is if it's a 1,200 or 1,500 round count class, there's going to be very little instruction because, the students that we teach, we're on the range for a few hours and we shoot very few rounds. And a lot of what we do is just allowing new shooters to become familiar and comfortable with shooting the gun. So if I'm out there looking to increase my skill set, I'm aware that I can do that in 200 or 300 rounds. And the tools, like you said, how being able to self-diagnose yourself, which I think a lot of students need to go. I feel like if you're going to take a class, you should have an idea on how to self-diagnose and self-coach. You have to be able to call your shots. And if not, it's going to be the first class you take. That's probably a question you should ask your instructor is, when I leave this class, will I know how to call my shots and kind of self-diagnose what I'm doing? And
that's exactly what a big emphasis on my class is learning what it's like to actually, and Eric can attest to this. I mean, there was probably well over 3/4 of the class that had never actually watched their sights lift in recoil, and knowing what it was like to see that happen and knowing that that's what calling a shot was, So, I mean, if anything they got out of the class was, if there was any one thing I could emphasize more than anything else, it was like, at least by the end of a 2-day class, you knew when you pulled a bad shot and you knew when you called a good shot. I mean, there was no mistaking. I've yet to have a student come out of the class and be like, I really don't know what the hell you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, it's so, for me, that's a big thing. And that's something I like to emphasize more than anything else.
Yeah. So I'm going to change the subject just a little bit here, but I also want to segue with, I shot on the range with Tim Knight for many, many years, thousands upon tens of thousands of rounds. And one thing he said to me, and I don't even know when it was, or, I mean, we were probably standing in the mud or rolling in the dirt or, in a snowstorm. And he said something to me at one point along the lines of, every time you pull the trigger on the range, you should learn something. And that's stuck with me. And it's always been in the back of my head. I've never really embellished on that much, but to hear you talk about the way you want people to get the quality versus the quantity. Because everyone's like, oh yeah, I went to the range and shot 200 rounds. I'm like,
right. Cool. What'd you get from that? Exactly.
Yeah. That's why I was stuck in B class for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tim, my question for you is something that I'm going to phrase it to make fun and have a laugh, but why do you want to become an instructor? And my question is really, why are you an instructor? Why did you want to become an instructor and teach people? And I phrased it because I know that you and I are going to have some classes together in the next couple of months.
I mean, for me, it's been like I've got such a passion for shooting. I don't think I've ever been so passionate about something. I mean, even when, the last 12, 13 years that I drove race cars, like I was pretty passionate about it, but never to this extent. Like it's like shooting it's a martial art. Yeah, it really is, for all intents and purposes. And that's, for me, it's just like having that journey. I've never been that type of guy that can pick up something, it's been like that quote unquote naturally gifted talent, where it's like I can pick up a gun and 6 months after I started shooting, I made GM. I'm not that guy. I've been the guy that's held down a full-time job. I've been a single dad of 2 kids for the last 12 years. Like I've had so much to do in normal life that, like I said, I started out as a C-class shooter and moved up to B-class. And I like being able to relate to the exact same kind of perils and plateaus that Eric had, like I was stuck in B-class and I didn't know what to do, and it took me getting a little bit of, of actual instruction. And actually for me, like the turning point, like I want to show other people how to do what I've learned how to do, actually came from taking Mike's class, Mike Seeklander, and Mike to this day, and probably till the day I die, Mike is like my number one mentor. Like he's the guy I go to when I've got questions about how to convey information. He's the guy I go to when, there's something that maybe I don't know exactly the wording on how to teach it. And for me, that was just, it was awe-inspiring to see somebody that could convey information in such a way that everything just made sense.
That's awesome.
And for me, like to want to be an instructor, it's not about the money. It's not about the notches in the belt or the accolades or anything like that. It's about seriously like having a passion of wanting to see a student or a fellow shooter have that same aha moment or that same feeling of, oh my God, I got that the same way I did, like those epiphanous moments where you're just like, oh my God, this totally makes sense now. Yeah. And this is why, and if I can be the guy that helps, kind of kickstart that for somebody, dude, that's awesome. To me, that's better than winning a national championship or a world championship to me.
I like it. I like it a lot. Hey, Jeremy, you got something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Eric, back to the 2-day practical performance course specifically, who's going to benefit the most from this? Is it the C-class shooter? Is it the master shooter? Who do you think who is going to benefit the most from this course?
And that's a tough one because I think everybody has something to benefit from. And like I touched on briefly earlier, it's all about the shooter. Even if you are the higher level shooter, because I had those concerns coming into the class. I'm like, okay, what am I going to get out of this? And like I said, as long as you're willing to pay attention to, what he's instructing to anybody at any skill level, there's something for you to learn. Heck, I'm a dot shooter. And when Tim was talking about iron sights, I had some aha moments when, there's a picture going around where I'm holding the target, the white target, and Tim's pointing at us. But I think there's something for everybody. I really can't say if there's a certain skill level that's going to benefit the most. By default, I would have, if I had to give an answer, I would probably say the lower skill levels, just because there's so much more information for them to be exposed to versus the information that I'm being exposed to by Tim is refreshers of stuff that I forgot. The way I describe it to people is it's like you got so much stuff in your arms and you're trying to pick up more stuff off the floor and you're dropping things as you're trying to pick up new skill sets and new mindsets. So
I like that.
I love it. What do you guys think, Eric? We were in the pre-show. You had mentioned there was a question that was asked to you or somebody near you with regards to competitive shooting and how that training scars can be created in the context of a defensive shooting. What are your guys' thoughts on participating in competitive shooting at the serious level and how that can affect you in a defensive shooting situation? And then Eric, if you want to lead that off, because the way it was awesome.
So I actually have a real life gauge for that scenario. Like I said, what got me into competitive shooting was my law enforcement side. I had done some active shooter training with simunitions in a school environment, and I felt I felt like I was okay. I thought I was a hot shot shooter prior to competition shooting, and then even as a B class shooter. A year later, I went back and did the same scenario active shooter training. My confidence, my ability was so far more advanced, even as a B class shooter. What we do in USPSA is a game. We're not trying to act like we're SEAL Team 6 out there. It truly is a game. However, all that stress under the clock, all those fundamentals that we stress so we can perform, that benefits both worlds.
That's awesome. What about you, Tim? How does the competitive shooting kind of breach or bridge the gap between the
I think it bridges the gap completely. Unfortunately, I see a lot of. It's bad to say, but I see a lot of like LE guys or military guys that talk about like, well, that it wasn't on the 2-way range, and when like crap hits the fan, you're gonna fall to like unloading and showing clear when you need to be scanning and assessing and things like that. It's like, man, you know what? Honest to God, I have shot with some of the best shooters in the world, who were also some of the best military shooters or military instructors or law enforcement shooters and instructors in the world. And the fact is they know how to turn things on and off, versus it's a game, or whether it's real life scenarios, or whether it's drills, or like everybody's the same. Like that whole thing, well, you're building bad habits in competition. I don't think anything could be farther from the truth. I don't think of any single instance where like a police officer that's been like an avid USPSA shooter has ever gotten himself into a situation where there's been a police involved shooting where that particular officer has been in a shooting, and then somewhere in the heat of the moment, they've unloaded and showed clear, or, you know what I mean? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. Actually, one of my closest teammates when I shot for Team SIG was a gentleman by the name of Yong Lee, and Yong is the lead instructor for, it's not Seattle.
Bellevue
Police Department, and has been their lead instructor for a number of years. And the guy is what is he, a 5 or 6 division?
I think he's currently a 5 GM.
Yeah. I mean, and the guy is at the pinnacle of the sport, and the funny thing is that guy is able to attribute everything that he's done in competition shooting and be able to meld it into useful information for new officers. I mean, he's got officers that are breaking, like department records as far as like qualifications and stuff like that, based on, material and stuff that he's worked on through his competition shooting career. So, I mean, anybody that thinks that competition shooting is not of value to them because it's not 2-way range, or it's not 360-degree range, or it's not this, or it's not that, it's completely blowing smoke up their rear to save ego more than anything else. I mean, there's something to be learned, something to be had, something to be gained every single time you step on the range, whether it's in practice or whether it's in competition. It's learning how to do everything under time constraints, and that, I mean,
that kind of talk's gonna get you killed on the streets, Tim.
At the end of the day, like, I don't care what, and this is where I kind of have to disagree. I know Clint years ago kind of said something about like, there are no timers in a gunfight. You're goddamn right. There are timers in a gunfight. The time is, the guy that's pointing a gun at you or get a gun out faster than you are under time. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. I mean, I love Clint Smith. I've trained under him, but I also feel like there is a timer there in a gunfight. So, yeah, I mean, I don't like training with a timer or training to a timer, but I also understand that there's definitely, time constraints in a gunfight.
You're absolutely right. And there's a time and place. There's a time and place for use of a timer,
There's a funny meme that went out after a self-defense shooting. It was a picture of the bad guy that got killed, and it said something shooting competition, second place, and it was the guy that got shot. So it was crazy.
I think with the timers is social media has skewed the legitimacy of the timer for training, because now you have guys that's all they want, the sub-second draw, and that's all they're focusing on. And I think there's the real world application of that gets lost. As far as using a timer in training, I agree. I think you have to have objective measures. How do I know if I'm getting faster?
You're absolutely right.
Again, getting the gun out of the holster and first shot on target in under a second and a half isn't the be all and end all. But if I can do it in a second and a half as opposed to 2.5 seconds, that'll allow me to be faster and more efficient in that life threatening self-defense encounter. So, Eric, who can become a grandmaster shooter in your opinion?
Anybody with the drive. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants that those 2 letters. They want that, fame, reputation that they think comes with it. But you have to have that drive. Anybody can make master to an extent, but to make that last 5%, it takes some drive and some dedication. So you have to have that fight in you.
So I have a question really quick, and I'll just throw it over to Tim because Eric just spoke. For those of us out there that aren't USPSA shooters, that aren't competition shooters, can you explain the ranking system for us really quick? Just, I've never competed. I've been training for years and years and years. I've been teaching for years and years and years. But you guys are throwing out terms that some of our listeners, including myself as a host, may not understand. So can you explain the ranking system, Tim?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So the ranking system in USPSA is like the brand new shooter, somebody that just, let's say they decide they're going to go shoot their first match and they like it so much that they become a member of United States Practical Shooting Association. So when they become a member, they're ranked as a U or as unclassified. So, and then as they move up through the ranks or just based on a skill level, and those skill levels, of course, there's probably 15 different like bar graphs or charts that kind of compare, like what the average law enforcement officer and what the average military operator has compared to like what an IDPA shooter has versus a USPSA shooter. So anyway, what those percentages are, or what those classifications are, it starts at a U as an unclassified. So you're a brand new unclassified shooter. And then it goes to D, which is D class, and then C, and then B, A, M, and GM. GM meaning grandmaster, M being master, and then A class, B class, C class, D class, right? So each of those percentages or each of those classifications are based on a percentage. And a lot of those percentages are based on like a national like a national aggregate based on like what are there, Eric? Probably about 70 to 90 or so classification or classifier stages, which are stages that any sanctioned USPSA club can put on.
Yeah, and they're all measured out to specifics. And so even though somebody in New Mexico is shooting the classifier versus somebody in Idaho, the measurements are supposed to be the same.
Right. So the same times, the same measurements as far as the targets, the distance to the targets and things like that are concerned. So, and then basically what those percentages break down, like a D class shooter is able to do, let's say a turning draw and a 3-target transition array in 7 seconds. Okay. Well, let's say 10 seconds. Okay. So they shoot that, they shoot all A's in an A zone target of a USPSA target in, let's say, 10 seconds to engage, like to turn and draw and engage 3 targets. Whereas, let's say a C-class shooter can do that in 9 seconds or 8 seconds. And then a B-class shooter could do that same thing. And these are all just, like hypotheticals. Sure, so like a B-class shooter could do that same drill or that same exercise in, say, 7 seconds. And an A-class shooter could do it in 6 seconds. And an M-class shooter could do it in 5 seconds. A GM could do it in 3 seconds. Okay. So those percentages based on your performances are what kind of gives you it puts you in a particular skill set. So a D class shooter, I tell people all the time in classes, like a grandmaster shooter, let's say at any given drill, let's say a draw and fire a round into an A zone in a USPSA target. A grandmaster shooter could do that in a second or less 100% of the time. So 10 out of 10 times that grandmaster level shooter is going to be able to do that particular exercise. He's going to be able to execute that 100% of the time. An M class shooter might do it 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times, but more than likely 9 out of 10 times. An A class shooter is probably going to be able to do that 75% of the time. So 7 to 8 times out of 10. Okay. A B class shooter is going to do that 6 out of 10 times. A C class shooter is going to be able to accomplish that 5 out of 10 times, and a D class shooter might be able to do it 4 out of 10.
And some of them are insane. Like LPRES is the most commonly shot classifier. And basically it's just 3 targets. You turn, draw, 222, reload, 222. I did that with a open gun. It's as tricked out as you can get in 5 seconds. And it was still an A class classification on Saturday. In 5 seconds, turn, draw, shoot 12 with the reload. And that's still only an A class.
Wow.
Right.
So I've got one more question, and then I'll turn it back over to Jeremy, and he can do whatever he wants to do. And it's a question for both of you guys. And I'm gonna it's a question I'm gonna ask Tim, but I want Eric to follow up. And Tim, the question for you is: at the end of your 2-day class, what is your expectation of the student? And then Eric, at the end of the 2-day class, when you went into it, did the class meet your expectations? So Tim, you go first and then kick it over to Eric and then back to Jeremy.
My expectation for my class, and I set my class up a little bit different than a lot of like competitive shooting instructors or I don't consider myself like a high ranking instructor. A lot of people kind of put me in that category, but I'm not. So we start on a 2-day class. We start on a particular like 28 to 32 round stage, right? It's like your typical USPSA stage. And I use that stage very first and foremost as an assessment tool. So as an instructor, I take notes for every single individual student. I list the things they do good and the things that I see that they could work on as far as improvement. And then we go back and we recall, with each student, like, what is it you feel like you'd like to get the most out of the class? And I'd like to be able to see if, okay, the things that they want to improve on are the same things that I see that they really could improve on. And then we try to meet in the middle. So by the end of 2 days, what I want my students to get out of the class is, even if they like absolutely bomb this, like we shoot that stage a couple of times throughout the course of 2 days. We shoot it first and foremost as an assessment. And then we go back and we revisit that stage about 3 times or 4 times throughout the 2-day course. At the end of the 2-day course, though, my graduation is for those students to be able to see for themselves a certain level of maybe not a certain level of progress. It may not be a complete improvement, versus like compared to like a score, so to speak. But if let's say they shot the stage on Saturday morning and they didn't see the sights for one single shot, but at the end of the 2-day course, they saw the sights for every single shot and they could literally score the stage on the fly. To me, that's a win.
Okay. Yes.
And that's what I want. I want to be able to have every student come off the stage at the end of a 2-day course or come out of the course feeling like they know without a shadow of a doubt, they know how to call shots. They know how to grip the gun. They know fundamentally how to hit everything they're aiming at any given point in time on the fly. And they know how to call the shots based on their stage performance. They know how to self-diagnose. That's it.
Okay, awesome. So, Eric, kicking the question over to you in a little bit of a different format, what were your expectations going into the class, and what were your realizations when you actually left the class? What did you take away from it?
So I got to make sure Tim's done drinking because I don't want him to spit out his drink. So hear me out, Tim. I actually I actually had lower expectations, and it's not in the negative way. Like I expected to get fundamentals and to learn about shooting and all that stuff. But where Tim exceeded my quote unquote low expectations is the mental aspect of the game is the big thing that he changed for me. And I was not expecting that. And to get that from him, it was a game changer. That's why I started winning matches. That's why I became the shooter that I am today. And that's why, but that's what I strive for moving forward. As you guys saw in our pre-match, I joke around. I was the class clown, and to a fault.
Really?
And Tim changed that about me in a good way. And so that's where he exceeded my expectations, and it was a big game changer for me. And I can never thank the man enough.
Good.
Oh, shucks.
I will say this, though. Okay? when you budget for his class fee and ammo and any lodging or travel expenses, also set some money aside for therapy. That was an expense I did not expect.
Clearly, you guys became best buds.
We've actually become very, very close. Like Eric is one of my go-to guys. Anytime I've got a shooting issue, just like buddies. I don't know, Eric. Jesus, we probably talk every single day almost now. So Eric has truly become one of my closest friends now. Not just because of the sake of the school or the class or what he's done for me or what I've done for him. I mean, just truly, genuinely, we've become really good friends.
Good.
So.
Yeah. I've stalked Tim from afar for a while. And it's nice to see that he does live up to his internet hype. He is a nice guy.
Awesome. So, Tim, I have a question for you, then I'll kick it over to Jeremy when you're done. It's just a follow-up. And I know Jeremy's getting like all huffy and puffy over there because I'm taking over.
No. It's because I'm overweight and it's difficult to lose. That's what that was. And thank you. I'll live on in internet infamy forever.
You and Eric obviously built a close personal relationship throughout your class. Mm-hmm. And I try to do that with my classes, with my instructor candidates and whatnot, my RSOs, CRSOs. My question to you is a little bit, it's a little bit selfish and loaded, but what type of, you travel around to do your classes and, you're kind of a big name in the USPSA world. What kind of training team do you use when you're putting together a class? I mean, like, let's say, Silver Mountain Instruction wanted to host you in Durango, Colorado. What type of, because we've got a lot of instructors that listen to this podcast to get little tits and bits and all these other things that we try to, bring into our classroom and give to our students. Mm-hmm. So what kind of training team do you use when you are, developing a class or teaching a class or, marketing a class or anything like that? Give us some little nuggets on that.
Man, that really puts me on the spot because
welcome to my world.
Unfortunately, I really don't have a training team. I've got a couple of people behind the scenes. Eric honestly has been like absolutely instrumental in my success as far as a supporter and an advocate for everything I do as a trainer, as an instructor, just as a shooter. So, I mean, there are quite a few times that I've kind of I'll run ideas or suggestions, or Eric will even come to me with, ideas or suggestions for things to help better the class or improve the class. I've got a particular person behind the scenes who we will leave unnamed that is kind of my website developer, as well as I run everything by her. I mean, she's my rock. As far as contacting anybody that's interested in being a class organizer or arranges or online social media content, things like that. I mean, she's been instrumental in that.
Can we call her Peggy?
We'll call her Peggy. So, I mean, and it, like I said, to have the support level I have with friends and who I consider, they're beyond friends. Like I consider Eric beyond a friend. I mean, you guys are family, and the fact that I can come to them with any sort of question. The fact is also being able to open myself up to criticism, to suggestions, to improvement, and I do the same thing with every single student. So one of the things I do in my class that I don't know if other instructors do the same thing is I make sure that I get with guys like Eric, as far as like the class organizer. I want to know every single person that took my class. I want to know their email address, and I want the best way of being able to get a hold of them. And I do follow-up emails with every single student. And whether you take a 3-hour class with me on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, or whether you take a full 2-day practical performance class with me, I'd like to do follow-ups. I like to befriend my students, for the fact that I think keeping that relationship going keeps the student motivated and driven to become a better shooter as well. And plus, I feel like, everybody kind of wants to kind of fluff you up a little bit, oh my God, I just spent $300 or $400 to take a class with Tim Herron, or took a $300 to $400 class to take a class with, Mike Seeklander or somebody else. It's all good and grand, and everybody kind of leaves with a smile on their face, and they think like, oh my God, that was great. But what to me, what makes a class great is 5 weeks down the road, 4 weeks down the road, a month down the road, 6 months down the road, having that same instructor follow up with their student on a friend level, not just an instructor to student level or a teacher to student level, but also from a friend level. Like, I want to know everything you're doing. I want to know how you're doing. How are local matches going? How is your practice going? Are you having any faults? Are you having anything that you're just struggling with? What can I help you with? And for me, like I said, man, this isn't just about like an occupation. It's a passion. It's a life. I want to see people truly succeed for the reasons they want to succeed, not for the reasons I want them to succeed. You know what I mean?
What do you think? I kind of like this guy already. So I think we're going to take his classes.
You're from Maryland. I want to add to Tim's after class email thing. I remember one of my fellow students posting an excerpt of Tim's email, and I was just like, wow, he wasn't that nice in mine.
Some people need a little more encouragement in directions that other people don't.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's perfect.
Therapy. I mentioned therapy.
That's perfect. I was just going to ask, how many students are in a class? So the 2-day practical performance student class, how many students are in that class?
So what I like to have for a 2-day class is like the most perfect number is 10. That allows me to be able to give really good instruction to every single individual of the class. I will go as max as 12. So 12 is kind of like that's the happy high number. 8 is required. So 8 is the minimum. 10 is like the happy place. 12 is not overwhelming, but 12 is just, I want to make sure, like, I will never be that type of guy that wants to sell out 15 to 20 seats for a class. I'm just not that guy. If you're looking for an instructor that just shuffles people in and out, look elsewhere. I'm not that way. I have every single one of my students, every single one of my patrons, like their best interests at heart. And I never want to stray from that. So yeah, 10 to 12 is like it's the happy place. 8 is kind of the minimum for a 2-day class. If we've got less than 8, it's like 6 to 7. We can actually turn like the practical performance class into a full 1-day class where 6 students can actually get more one-on-one time with the instructor, but we can also cover the same level of material, of a 2-day class in one single day. So.
Yeah, we're hosting you in August, and that's one of the things that I was kind of was struck by with how you structure your classes. And we're talking about the minimum and the maximum. And you said, for the 1-day, 6 is the max, and the 2-day is 12. And it kind of makes sense why you do it that way, because you have the integrity, and you're not a certificate mill. Eric, one of the things that we like to talk about, and that I completely forgot to get to in the beginning of the class, is is break down what day 1 and day 2 look like for you, for the students. What did you guys do on day 1? Is it fundamentals? Are you doing stage breakdowns and planning? So what does each day look like?
The first portion primarily was Tim doing an assessment of all of us. And then as we progressed, we started, working on the drills and fundamentals. And then we continued that into day 2. And then we ended back on the same stage where we were able to put some of the stuff that we had learned into practice. Now, it wasn't perfect by any means. I actually remember we focused on the start position, the whole drop leg thing, and I was so hyper focused on that I screwed it up. I think like 3 times in a row. But anyway, so all the things that we learned throughout the week, we were able to try and implement into this stage to see how we improved and whatnot. And in fact, I had some unfinished business with that stage, Tim, and we recreated it at a local match shortly after that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great. So you guys, Tim, you do some other stuff, which you do some online training. Talk to us what that looks like for our students. That way, if they can't get out to a Tim Herron course, how they can still benefit from your approach to training.
Yeah. So the online training it's a little new to me as well as it is to students, but it's something that there is, I believe, a definite advantage to people. I've had a lot of students actually reach out to me and ask about online training. So I've kind of come up with a way to be able to do online training based on about a 1 hour time frame, about $50 an hour. And what we do is if you've got access to a computer, especially like through Skype, we can do a Skype like face-to-face, meeting with each other. I also asked that student, and again, most of my students are USPSA or practical shooting based. So, they might have issues with like getting into and out of positions, or they don't know necessarily, again, they don't know what they don't know. We've all heard that term before. So somebody they'll shoot a stage and be like, I just don't know why I'm losing 2 seconds to my local masterclass shooter or my local GM. And we can actually go through that video together and be able to find weak points in their game. It's not necessarily just for USPSA shooters. In fact, I've got a couple of students now that have reached out to me to do the online training, and just simply based on just static drills, how to get better drawing the gun from concealment, how to get better at reloading the gun from concealment, what they should be expecting or allowing themselves to see or not see, or maybe they're over refining sight pictures, and those types of things. Maybe their dry fire game could use a little bit of help. They just, anytime that you feel like you've got a plateau and you just don't know how to break free of that plateau, but maybe you don't feel like a full 1 day or 2 day class or even a half day clinic is for you. Or maybe we're clear across the United States from each other. That's where I think the online training is a huge benefit to shooters that are serious about self-improvement.
That's awesome. Any requirements other than, fully dressed?
Not at all.
I'm asking for Jets.
I'm not wearing pants right now.
Yes.
You God, don't stand up.
So
that's the best part about podcasts, though.
There aren't requirements. In fact, the first time that we meet, if you send me an email and say that you're, obviously express to me that you're interested in some online training, or internet style training, things like that, that I want to be able to talk with you. Maybe our first meeting is just on the phone for 20, 30 minutes. And I want to learn from you. What is your biggest weaknesses? What are your flaws? What are the things that you want to improve in your particular game? So, I've got like I said, I've got one of my shooters that's actually his biggest concern is he wants to be able to go to a fellow instructor and Gabe White. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Gabe White. Gabe is a very near and dear friend of mine. I've known Gabe since back when I used to kind of co-host the Practical Pistol Show with Ben Steger. Gabe was on there as a guest quite a few times, and Gabe and I have had quite a few lengthy conversations about shooting and all things pistol. But I've got a couple of guys that are interested in bettering themselves so that when they go to a Gabe White class, they've got particular skills or drills that they want to be able to meet or exceed based on Gabe's criteria to earn like turbo pins or dark pins or light pins or things like that. So, and those are things that I can help with those things, whether it's, like I said, refining your draw stroke, whether it's refining your grip on the gun at full presentation, refining your mental aptitude, mental game, getting yourself beyond whatever plateau seems to be hindering you. And that's where online training comes into effect. So, and again, it's kind of the same thing as far as student, they're learning as an instructor, and it's kind of a new media for me. I'm learning as well, but so far it's gone really, really good. And it's been awesome. It's been real positive. So
that's awesome. Yes. It's I think the online option is a viable student, especially in the format that you break it down, where it's a one-on-one meeting where it's in real time. It sounds like they were able to send you some videos beforehand and you can break it down with them during that one-on-one session.
Exactly.
So Eric, talk to us a little bit about what you do. Are you a firearms instructor as well? I know you're a grandmaster shooter and you host Tim out there in Idaho. Before we jump off here, if you want, let our listeners know what you're up to these days.
Well, I'm actually I work in software support for a public safety software company. As far as what I do with USPSA, I'm our local match director. So I run about 24 plus matches a year for our local club here. It is very distracting to my my shooting, I would say, but with my personality, I just can't stand by. I want to raise the level of our shooting locally. And if it's going to happen, I want to be a big part of that and, instrumental in the growth of USPSA, especially in our area. I've looked at our numbers prior to me taking over and we had decent numbers, and it's kind of, it kind of makes me smile to know that I've brought our shooting to the next level here locally. But that's primarily my involvement with USPSA.
That's awesome.
If I may interject real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will have to say, and that was kind of Eric's kind of downfall, unfortunately, was being kind of the match director for a lot of the local matches, especially at like the Nampa Rod and Glove Club, there in Boise. Eric has done amazing things for the shooting community there in Idaho. The fact that he's not overwhelmed and ready to like swallow the muzzle of a Remington 870 shotgun because he's just so burned out is amazing to me. Because I know just in my racing background, I mean, unfortunately for me, that's kind of what burned me out of it was kind of doing all of the volunteer work ahead of time. Like I decided to become a president of the club and like do all of the race car stage designs and things like that for autocross and things. And it took its toll on me to the point where I was so burned out. And that's been my biggest fear for Eric. And I've voiced this concern to Eric numerous times, was like, dude, just whatever you do, don't burn yourself out. Like, I know we're all run on a volunteer, like on volunteer status, but just take a break when you need a break, Yeah. And the fact that Eric has really been able to kind of mold new guys actually to be able to take over the club and do a lot of club activities and volunteer things for the club as well is a testament to the love and concern that he has for the club to see the club succeed. I mean, the fact that dude, he can reach out and literally snap of a finger and be like, okay, guys, we're going to have a club meeting on a Saturday and we're going to rebuild a bunch of our walls and barricades and we're going to repaint steel and we're going to do this. And like within 20 minutes, there'll be 10 people, no less than 10 people are like, done, consider it done. We're going to be there at 7:30 in the morning. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And it's taken care of. I mean, just the level of volunteerism and love and passion that Eric has as far as being able to grow the club level at his local is just amazing.
And I've been way past burnt out several times. And those people that show up, that's what's kind of reminds me, okay, why am I doing this? Because when you're running a 100 shooter, local match, that you are not shooting at your top level. Nope. You're not shooting what you're capable of. There's so many distractions. I've lost it. I've been on the line about to get started and someone have to pull me off the line to go handle some match director stuff. But like I said, I've been burnt out, but when things like those range days happen and those volunteers step up, it reminds me of what I'm doing.
Tim, I believe what you're talking about is leadership.
Absolutely.
That's what he has. And I mean, the whole training team question that I asked you earlier is going to come full circle later, but leadership, that's what you're talking about with Eric. He has a gift to lead people, whether it's
absolutely
his own demise.
I make people call me Supreme Leader. It's an Asian joke.
Nice.
This guy
Before I relocated to Albuquerque, like I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. And I just actually moved to Albuquerque. Geez, what was it, Jeremy? September, I think is when I came in.
Yeah.
So, I've been in, and the funny thing was for about the last year, I've been talking about like, I'm thinking I'm going to relocate. Maybe I'll move to Albuquerque. And the whole time Eric's been like, are you freaking nuts? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why don't you move to Boise? Like be part of the Idaho crew. And I've never met a more tight knit group of shooters and club members. I mean, these guys do everything together beyond just coming to the club, and shooting on a Saturday or Sunday. I mean, they do so much together and have built such a strong relationship and friendships with each other. It's mind blowing. It's really cool.
The shooting community is crazy. I mean, you'll have people you're directly competing against that will give you equipment. They will give you the equipment that potentially could lead to you beating them. Right. It's crazy what the shooting community is.
Yeah, but the problem is, Tim, when you move to Albuquerque, now you have to start carrying a rifle in your car.
No, you can't do that because it'll be stolen the second you go into a gas station.
So Breaking Bad is true.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Breaking Bad is the PG version of
I will admit though, as long as I've been in Albuquerque so far, it is a beautiful place. I don't have anything but great things to say about the city, actually. So, I mean, in the 4 months or almost 5 months that I've lived here now, it's very easy to call this place home. So
that's good to hear.
It's awesome, man. We often joke about and poke fun at the crime level that there is in Albuquerque. Most of the violent crime is kind of contained within that community of violent criminal actors and guys that, William April. Is it William April or don't hang out with stupid people at stupid places doing stupid things.
Exactly
right. Yeah. So, and then the property crime, that's everywhere. But I have one question before we wrap up because last year I was going to start shooting USPSA and it didn't happen. So I'm going to make it happen this year. Yes. But what's a realistic expectation for me to come in and go from a D or C class shooter? I'm thinking maybe low C is where I'd realistically be, depending on stage fright and everything else. It seems like every match that I shoot, I can't seat my magazine. So low C. What's a realistic expectation to climb up to A or better?
Honestly, realistic expectations come out and just get a good assessment of your level. You're never really going to know what you're capable of until you just come out to an event and just shoot a match, and the great thing is nobody's going to laugh at you. Nobody's going, obviously if they laugh at you, they're going to be laughing with you because you've just done something that's just funny.
It's your buddies that'll laugh at you.
Exactly right. but as far as coming out to a club level, like come out to Rio Grande or even shoot a local out at Zia, I mean, they're free. They're easy to get to. Squad with me, squad with with anybody. Guys that are even a higher classification you. That's the one thing that is awesome about the sport. Just as far as shooting as a whole, nobody wants to see anybody fail. I have yet to go to any club, any organization, any class that I've ever gone to with any amount of students that I've ever gone to where one student to the next student, even if they're having a friendly competition between themselves as, who's going to win the day. I've never seen anybody not literally be able to give the shirt off their own back to help a fellow friend or shooter out. But just take an honest assessment of yourself. Take yourself with a grain of salt. Don't take yourself too seriously. That to me, that's the worst thing you can do is to take this sport so seriously that you end up almost burning yourself out, or you overwhelm yourself with just how much there is to learn that you don't want to come back. But it's okay. It's okay to fail. Like, we learn from failures. We learn from the mistakes that we make, not from the successes that we have. The successes we have are a byproduct of the failures that we made earlier in our career. So, come out to a match, dude, bring a couple 100 rounds of ammo, a couple of magazines, a mag pouch, and a holster and a gun, and just have fun, smile, laugh, have a good time, meet some absolutely great people, and you'll get better instantly. I mean, it's hard to not get better.
The only regret I can guarantee you will have is that you didn't start sooner.
Oh, hands down.
I like it.
And don't get caught up in any gear race. Bring your CCW, put mags in your pockets. You're not going to win anything. You know what I mean? Just as long as you have enough mags to get through a stage, put them in your pockets. No one cares. Exactly. All we care about safety versus, more than versus what your performance as a new shooter. We just don't want you putting any new holes in anybody, including yourself.
Right.
Nice. Yeah,
exactly right.
I've kind of committed to myself that I would run it from concealment.
I think it's a great idea.
Because there's IDPA. I don't think IDPA can run appendix.
No,
maybe I'm mistaken.
That's the weirdest thing in the world to me. It blows my mind. IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association, but you're not allowed to shoot from concealment, even though a good 75% of concealed carrier practitioners now carry appendix.
I can one up you, Tim. They allowed PCC and IDPA before they did carry optics.
Yeah,
PCC.
It makes me want to take a folding chair and smack myself in the face like a wrestling match. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But it is what it is.
So I think you and I talked before, and I think I'd probably compete at limited, right? That'd be appendix.
Yep.
Running M&P 9C until
you're running an M&P 9C. Yeah. So what do you get? About 14 rounds in the mag on those? 12.
I can get up to 17 with it'll take the full size.
Okay, perfect. So you'll load up your couple of magazines on it. You'll start loaded with one in the chamber. So you got 18 rounds in the gun plus an extra round, an extra magazine or two magazines on the hip. Start from a concealment, you shoot limited minor, and dude, you will have a blast. I promise you.
And another reason to not get caught up in a gear race before you do those first couple matches is you're going to see a squirrel and you're going to go off in some tangent that you never expected to,
Exactly
Seriously.
Right.
So yeah.
You're like, oh, that guy's got a red dot on his Glock 34. I need that. That's gonna be the game changer. And then you buy one.
I did the opposite.
Never mind.
Yeah, I did the opposite. I showed up with an XDM 525 thinking I was hot shit. Like, I had no idea about 2011s and metal guns. I'm like, I was shooting and make it worse, it was a 45 ACP. I was shooting limited with a 45. You can't shoot a more expensive round in limited than a 2-3 grain bullet
in a cheaper gun.
Hey, to be fair though, you purchased an XDM, so it's kind of expected.
I thought I was hot shit, man. Oh man.
My first gun was an XDM. An XD,
mine was too. I was an XD.
I was an XD.
It wasn't a gun.
Bass Pro.
It wasn't a gun that I had just had and like, I'm going to go shoot. It was a gun I bought for competition.
Oh
and
my God.
Mistakes were made.
I'm sorry.
Nice. What do you shoot now, Eric? What gun do you shoot now?
Oh boy.
Go ahead, Eric. Tell him
I used to be a Walther Q5 fanboy, and I still think highly of those guns. I shot that for a year and a half, about 15,000 rounds, bone stock. Guns phenomenal. I just recently made the change to the 2011 world, and I'm shooting a race gun. I want to see where I can perform at that level, and then I'll probably go back to irons with the Neanderthals like Tim.
Yes.
If the Glock 48 happens, man, I've been toying about getting that, and I'm probably one of the few people that's looking forward to that. I'm not a Glock fanboy. I actually talk a lot of crap to Andy because he likes Glocks.
What is the 48?
It's it's like a single stack Glock between the grip of a 19 and then a 4-inch barrel, so kind of close to the length of a 17.
Right, it's like a 17 with a 19 frame, but it's a single stack frame, so it holds what is it? It holds 10. Like 10. Yeah. It's actually a really cool gun. Like, I'm a very small frame person. I'm like 5'5", 145 pounds. So like a Glock 19, like I can conceal and carry a Glock 19 pretty well, but like that Glock 48 is like, that's baller for a guy my size to be able, it's thinner, it's easier to conceal, and you still get like 10 rounds in the gun. Yeah. So
I put the shield on, because my wife has a shield, and if I wear that thing concealed, it's night and day different than the 9C. Uh-huh. And I've been talking to Sean Herron of We Like Shooting. There's a company out there that makes a long slide for it that bumps it up to 4.25-inch barrel. And I've just been waiting for that to come back in stock, and then Glock finally releases the gun that I want. It's like a single. It's like a plastic 1911, right?
Those bastards do that.
You need to find somebody with a 2011 when you go shoot this match. Just go to an empty bay and pump some rounds downrange. Your mind's going to be blown. And Tim's Atlas. So I know I'm rambling here, but when Tim came down for the class, I had a couple 1911s that I knew they weren't custom, but I was pretty happy about them. And then he showed me his true custom Atlas, and a tear rolled down my eye. I felt so poor. I felt so poor.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Yeah, I'll probably end up shooting against or with Tim here in the next couple months.
Yeah.
I think they have a match on the 19th or something. I might make it out there, that one.
Come on out, man. Let's do it. Well, the 19th, I don't know. I'm supposed to do an RSO class on the 19th to get my range safety officer education and certification. So
yeah, you are, and that's going to be a fun class.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I want to shoot a match a month. That's my goal. Match a month every other month. Maybe.
The great thing is I was afraid when I got here to Albuquerque, like to Kansas City, we've got 3 separate USPSA clubs, and in Kansas City, I mean, dude, you could shoot a match a week. And I was really afraid when I came down here, like not knowing the shooting community at all. Like, I'm going to get down to Albuquerque. I'm not going to know anybody. I'm not going to be able to make any friends. And I'm sure as hell not going to be able to have any places to go shoot or call home, as far as like a home range or shoot practices or even shoot matches. And dude, I've been blown away. Like, like Rio Grande or also Caja del Rio, which is an old club, I guess, from Santa Fe that came out and shoots at Albuquerque City Range, and they shoot 2 times a month. So you got 2 matches a month there. And then Zia does, kind of their fun, like practical pistol, action pistol match. The cool thing is it's free, dude. You show up at like, what is it, 9 a.m. You're done by 11:30 noon. You go have lunch with your buddies, but you get some good practical pistol experience in, and it's free. That's unbelievable to me, And then Rick Kennedy has got Founders Ranch, which is 35 minutes east of Albuquerque, which, I mean, for a guy like me that's used to driving 45 minutes to an hour to the most close local match, 30 minutes, that's the farthest I got to drive for a match, and they shoot 2 times a month. I mean, the fact that you can go in Albuquerque and any Saturday or even like the 4th Sunday or 5th Sunday of the month, you can shoot a match anywhere in the city within 15 to 30 minutes away is freaking awesome.
Make sure you take Tim up on that offer to shoot a match with him. I know if he was down here, we'd have to kick people off his squad just because everybody would be swarming over there just to get that opportunity.
Well, Andy, who was usually on here with us, he shot a match with Tim out at Zia, and he told me just how gracious Tim was after the match to give him a few pointers. And Andy's not a bad shooter. He has some. He's been trying to diagnose his low left for a while, and I think Tim is the first instructor in the shortest amount of time that he spent with an instructor working on it to get it corrected. And I kind of feel bad after the time. I was like, man, Andy, I've known you for a while. You were my student like 5 or 6 years ago. And when he took Judson's class, we worked on it a little bit because he had some reservations there. And that might have helped him out a little bit. But I was like, short of that 15 minutes that I worked with Andy in the classroom doing some dry fire stuff, I was like, it was just not even a thought on my mind. And here it is, Tim, first time he ever met Andy, didn't know him from Jack, and is working with him. So that was awesome.
Yeah. Zia is a really cool place. I'm glad to like be able to call that range my home too, kind of thanks to you and the club at Zia. Just being able to have a place to go, and after those matches too, because they're so, they're just 3 stages or 4 stages, but they're free, and everybody always like, wow, I brought 200 rounds and I shot like 150. I've got 50 extra rounds. And it's like, when I see something that somebody's doing, they just feel like they're just like, you can tell, when you see a fellow shooter, like you go to the range and you see a guy, they're just like, God, I just can't seem to fix this myself. It's like, I want to just put my arm around him, like, come here, little buddy, come here, let me help you out, and that's me, like I said, it's not about the accolades. It's not about the money or any of that kind of stuff. It's just like, I truly want to see people involve themselves in the shooting sports or just in shooting in general and get better at it. Like I love seeing people's successes. So, I mean, to me, that's the ultimate, that's the ultimate win.
Well, I for one can't wait to take your class. And I think it's coming up. You've got a couple of them coming up, but I think that Jeremy posted something that we're going to do something in September, I believe.
August. It's August
3rd and 4th.
Yeah.
Tell us, Tim, where can we find you online? Where can we find you in the digital world?
So the social media wise, I've got just look me up at Tim Herron on Facebook or Tim Herron Shooting. That's my quote unquote athlete page. But I get a lot of traffic that way. I've also got a YouTube channel, and I try to post something there on the YouTube. At least once a month. And a lot of times it's how-to videos or, it's things that like, again, to kind of help shooters get better at things. I've also got an Instagram, which is Tim Herron Shooting, or you can go to my newly launched webpage, which is timherronshooting.com. So
I will segue off of that Jeremy Gill has been creating a webpage for me that I think is absolutely unbelievable. I'm not going to necessarily say it here, but if you need a web page built, reach out to Jeremy because he has done an amazing job on building the SMI web page. So I really appreciate that, Jeremy. Eric, you got someplace where we can find you out there on the interwebs?
I'm known as the Range Panda because I'm a portly Asian. But Tim and I and a fellow shooter named Kenny Platt, we're going to be starting a podcast called Make Ready Podcast. You can find that on Facebook. And our first show will drop the 18th. Right now, we've got an announcement show up that I'm just waiting for iTunes to approve to make sure we're good to go. And then we'll start dropping podcasts. We haven't really decided if we're going to do a show every week or 2 a month, but we will go from there. But yeah, you can find us on Facebook, Make Ready Podcast.
We're hoping it's going to be awesome. Like that.
I'm sure it will be.
We've got a great 3 people. We're talking about like an Americanized shooting version of was it the Grand Tour with? That's what we're hoping anyway. Yeah. Well, at least that's what I'm hoping.
And what's nice is we all have different backgrounds. Kenny's a limited GM. Tim's a single stack GM, and I'm a carry optics GM, and we don't always agree, respectfully, but we always have, a common mindset, but there are things that we have different approaches on. So I think that'll be a good podcast that we're not always going to, pat each other on the backs and agree with everything.
I agree.
I thought you were going to call yourself a Mexican or a Hispanic.
All right.
I think I see Jeremy's eye twitching.
Yeah, before iTunes takes us down for
you better read that disclaimer again. You read at the beginning. Yeah.
If anybody other than Sean Herron was the owner and president of Firearms Radio Network, I might be a little bit concerned. Which, if you guys haven't checked out their podcast, it's great, as well as the other podcasts on Firearms Radio Network, Civilian Carry Radio. Tim, I think you were a co-host on with those guys a few weeks ago.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, so they're doing some great things over there. I'm looking forward to listening and watching the Make Ready podcast, if you guys can do that on YouTube. If it's half as entertaining as this one was, which I'm confident it will be because you won't have me kind of cramping your style. It's going to be awesome.
I just want to add something real quick. I hadn't heard of this format prior to talking to Tim about being on the show, and I loved it. I've never heard of you guys prior to this, but I started listening to some of your past episodes, and I was really impressed with you guys are doing something different, which is amazing.
That's awesome. I appreciate that.
I agree.
We got to work on the consistency piece, but we're getting there. This is episode 2. No, I was playing.
I think you need to screen your guests a little bit better.
That's for damn sure.
We do. We don't. Any of the old fuds that want to come on, we there's always a scheduling conflict. So there's that. It's like, what kind of guns do you own? What do you think about the bump stock?
See, someday it's going to happen to me. What kind of gun do you have? Well, I shoot a 1911. Yeah, thank you, but no thank you. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys can bring the 1911 back to mainstream right now, because anybody that carries a 1911, in my opinion, is a FUD. But what do I know?
VZ grips.
Yeah. All right. Hey, guys, don't forget to put those socks on your guns when you're carrying them. That way you can carry them comfortably. We'll be back here next Monday, same time, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard. Go to timherronshooting.com. Check that out. afteractionproject.com/giveaway. If you want to enter to win some cool prizes, it isn't going to cost you anything there. We appreciate everybody's time. We will see y'all next week.
Man, we really hope you enjoyed listening to that episode as much as we did interviewing and having our guests on. Be sure to share this with your friends and family and head over to patreon.com/afteractionproject. We'd love to have you on as a guest panelist, and be sure to check out those other rewards that we have for our Patreons.
If you're a recent graduate of a firearms-related training course and would like to join us on our show, or if you'd like us to review a specific firearm-related training course or instructor, shoot an email to show@afteractionproject.com. Remember to join a local firearms advocacy organization. As always, stay safe, shoot straight, and remember to secure your firearms so that unauthorized persons cannot gain access to them.